Hello everybody, it's Veda here, and today we're going to be benchmarking the RTX 3060 Ti inside of Ark Survival Ascended. I'm pairing it with the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D with 32GB of DDR5 6000MHz RAM. I've got the latest Nvidia drivers and I've got the game installed on an SSD, so with that, let's jump on into the game. So to begin with, we're going to be playing at 1080p using 100% resolution scale. The low settings actually sets it to like 58%, which is a bit bizarre, but yeah. As you can see here, it says custom because I have gone ahead and actually manually adjusted everything to the lowest settings in the game. Other than these sliders here, I've just left these at whatever they are at default. You know, these 0.1, 0.5s or 0.01. I've just left them at default, but everything else I've set to the lowest. So let's jump on in and see how it runs here. Alright, so here at 1080p using the absolute minimum settings in the game. At least in the settings options, I know you can go into config and adjust certain things, like you can turn volumetric clouds off, which does have quite a bit of an impact, but it also makes the game look significantly worse. You know, if you're going to do stuff like that, you might as well just be playing Ark Survival Evolved, essentially, and just not play this game. If you're going to go into console and adjust everything really, really low manually in this console right here that I've opened, you might as well just play Ark Survival Ascended at that point. But I've got some weird texture bugs here, as you can see. I keep getting these, and I've found out it's when I change settings. I was in the main menu changing settings, obviously. I changed preset down to the minimum in the main menu, and it still makes the textures in the game bug out. I don't know. I don't know if I have to completely restart the game to avoid that, but the settings do apply when you go back to the main menu and set them there. But it seems like the rocks and stuff and the ground clutter still bug out on the map and just kind of float around. I found that out testing the 1650 the other day, essentially. But as you can see here with the RTX 3060 Ti at 1080p minimum settings, we are getting around high 60s to the 80 FPS range, averages at 75. Let's fly around a little bit, and because I've got the game installed on SSD as well, it's going to really help reduce the stutters when you're traveling really fast. Obviously, flying around is you're traveling much faster than you would normally on any kind of dyno or anything when you actually are using the fly command, because it's just really fast, right? So it's not really accurate for how fast you're going to travel. I'm just basically trying to say it'll make the 1% lows worse because you're traveling much faster than anything that you can travel with naturally in Ark. Even if you set the flyers, you know, speed up. I don't know if you can do that in this game, but Ark Survival Ascended, I'm sure you're Ark Survival Evolved rather. I'm sure you're well aware of the fact that flyers by default now, you can't level up their speed, but you can turn that setting on. I'm not sure about that in this game though. In Ascended, I'm not sure. But even in the swamp here in the redwoods, we're still getting like high 70s, mid 80s sometimes. Let's go into the redwoods. Let's go over here, see what kind of FPS we're going to be getting. And obviously we are completely GPU bound here. The Ryzen 7 7800X 3D is actually a very capable CPU, of course, and way overkill for a GPU like this. But we are getting 70s, 60s, which is completely fine. I've had no issues so far. 1% loads are at 40, but honestly I've not felt it at all. You know, I've not had any like major stutters or anything. We are allocating 7.2 gigs of VRAM right now to the game, which is quite a bit, you know, for absolute minimum settings, but in reality we're using about 5 gigs. We're using just over 5 gigs in the game right now on the lowest settings. And one of the issues that we're having here is the shadows are kind of following me like really weirdly. That's I've noticed that this happens on low settings, like really, really low settings. We're on minimum, so yeah, that is one of the issues with setting the graphics so low, is the shadows kind of follow you around really close. But if it wasn't so goddamn dark in this place, we might be able to actually see what the game looks like. Let me just fly out of here. We'll go to like this middle area where there's I believe there should still be a cave. There was that massive cave here, remember? Oh, Titanosaur, hello. But yeah, it looks like this cave isn't here anymore. You know what I'm talking about, right? On the vanilla game, or I say vanilla. I'm talking like this is a modded version. Feels like it's modded, you know what I mean? Like the textures. But yeah, the cave isn't here. At least I can't see it. Maybe they moved it a little bit. But you know where I am. You can find gigas in this place. But I also want to see what the textures actually look like here. It's quite dark, in all honesty. Quite grainy. Doesn't look great. Obviously, it's minimum settings. Doesn't look great. 70 FPS. Yeah, it looks like you're going to get around 70, 75 FPS on average with these settings on 1080p. And yeah, it's completely fine. VRAM's still totally fine. CPU usage is quite high. for the Ryzen 7, but it's okay. It's okay, guys. And in terms of actual RAM usage, we're only using like 15 gigs, so totally fine. I would expect the RAM usage to increase the longer you play, and also if you start building a big base and stuff, you probably have some performance issues there. There's not really much you can do about that. I don't know if it's an issue in this game, but I know in Ark Survival Evolved, if you start building big bases, and you start painting those bases especially, you start to have really bad performance issues. And there isn't really a PC that's going to save you from that. It's kind of just like an engine thing, I believe, or it's just really intensive. So there isn't really a PC that's going to save you from that. And I know that for a fact because there are big Ark YouTubers who built big bases and had issues with their bases. And I think, what's his name again? Syntac used to do that. He used to build big bases and always got to a point where he started having performance issues in his bases. So he had to like calm down with how he built. But with that, let's switch over to 1440p and see how it runs here. All right, so now we're testing out 1440p, 100% resolution scale. Something interesting that this game does is when you change resolution, it actually changes the resolution scale as well. Super annoying. So I've had to turn it back up to 100. It actually set it to 80 just by changing the resolution, but it's okay. We're still using minimum settings in the game, as you can see. So let's jump back in, see how it runs. All right, and here we are. Now the game looks significantly sharper at 1440p. It doesn't look as blurry. It's still a mess though. Like the settings, or the graphics rather, they're still not great. It doesn't look particularly that good. My biggest issue isn't necessarily like the textures and stuff. It's just, for some reason, some games, when they're on really low settings, they just get really dark. And I don't know if you can see it, like every texture has like this weird dark shadow around it, if that makes sense. Like, can you see it? Like all those hills, very dark. The grass is super dark. All those bushes, they're really dark. You can't see the color on them. Like, where's the color? Like, there's only color there. But you can kind of see like all the bushes, they have like really terrible shadows, so it makes them look really dark. All the trees, they're like really dark, especially that one there in the middle. You see it? Super dark tree. All the rocks got a really dark shadow behind them. It's really hard to see them. It's yeah, it's not great. It's really jarring. And you see, as I get close to this tree, those shadows pop in, make it super dark. It's making it really hard to see what is here. This didn't used to be the case with Ark Survival Evolved, I believe. Like, because if you turn shadows down, your shadows just disappeared, or they just like went pretty heavily. Like they just pretty much went. What the hell's going on over here? Whereas in this game, it seems like when you turn shadows down, it just makes them super dark, which is a setting like SSAO usually helps with that, you know, to make shadows not look as dark and stuff and make them actually look like shadows, not just a black texture. But because of course we're using minimum settings, it's just making the shadows super dark here. And it look like these bushes really dark. Really, it's hard just to see basically what you're looking at. Oh, super intensive on this mountain. Jesus Christ. I'm not sure why it's so intensive here. Maybe it's because it's a mix between the swamp, I believe, and the river is flowing, maybe. I don't know. Like river flowing textures, and then we're looking at the redwoods. I guess we're just rendering in a lot of stuff here. Wow, that's really intensive there. Jeez. That's the most intensive area I've ever found on this game. Granted, I've not spent too much time on here. Wait, did you just kill someone? Anki, are you a criminal? Who did you just kill? Oh, Sabertooth. I could barely tell what you were. I thought it was a Ravager. But, yeah, anyways, at 1440p here, we are going to see averages of around 50 FPS. Now, we did just find that really intensive area, which is not... which is obviously not ideal in the 30s, and it definitely didn't feel too good. And it probably reduced my 1% or my average FPS as well there. But what are you killing? Oh, compies. You know, I've raised an army of compies a few times and gone out on big hunting runs with like 30 compies. This place is super intensive. Oh, hey, dude. Never tamed one of them actually, because I've not played enough to tame one. Yeah, this place right here is mega intensive. I'm not sure why. I'm really not sure why this place is super intensive. It's got to be with the flowing water here or something. I don't know. Wow, I'll have to take note of where this is. Okay. Yeah, right there is like really overly intensive. It's kind of crazy. But for actual VRAM usage, interestingly enough, we're still using around a similar amount as 1080p, which makes almost no sense because we are playing at a higher resolution. So we should be using more VRAM right now, but apparently not. Apparently we're using the same amount of VRAM for a higher resolution. Interesting stuff. Our actual RAM did go up. We are at now 15 gigs the longer I've been playing here. I'm trying to find the starting beach. It's really hard for me to see where the hell I am. Okay, I know where I am now. Because it looks, it's similar, but it's still different. You know? It's still a bit different. FPS here, it's not great. We're in the 40s. You can play Ark like this, but normally I do say that Ark feels totally fine to play at 40 FPS range, because I actually did play Ark Survival Evolved all the way through every single time at around 40 something FPS. But after I've just played at 60 FPS there, you can feel it. You know, after I was in those 60, 70 FPS ranges, you can feel the slowdown in movement and the responsiveness go down a little bit. You can actually feel the frames gone, right? You can feel the difference between 40 and 70 FPS. At least I can. But saying that, if you always play at 40 something FPS, you won't know the difference. You know what I mean? You won't tell. For example, like if you play games at 60 FPS, you can't tell the difference between 60 FPS and 240 because you've never played 240. I'm not saying that 240 it doesn't feel better, because it definitely will, but you won't necessarily be able to feel it unless you actually already experienced high FPS, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. But we are at quite a bit less FPS here at 1440p, and it is a lot less. It's like what, 20 FPS on average less, 25 FPS sometimes. Yeah, it's quite a bit less FPS here at 1440p. And we're not testing 4K today because realistically no one's buying a 3060 Ti, or nobody has a 3060 Ti for 4K gaming for most games, especially not games like Ark. You know, you're going to be getting a much more powerful GPU if you're playing Ark at 4K, or you're planning to play Ark at 4K. So we're not testing it here. It's just a pure waste of time. But I think that's going to do for minimum settings. Let's go back to the main menu. We'll set the settings to low, because it actually leaves quite a few of the settings on high, believe it or not, and we'll see what that runs like. Alright, so we're now back in the main menu. We're back at 1080p. I have gone ahead and put the resolution to 100% again, and for graphics we're now on the low preset, which, believe it or not, puts general shadows to high, global illumination quality to high, light bloom on, and foliage quality to high. I've never seen a low settings that put shadows and global illumination quality to high. Like literally the preset down from the highest settings in the game. That's kind of insane that it does that, but it does, so let's try it out. Alright, and here we are back in the game at low settings. You can totally see like the shadows and stuff have changed quite a bit in the global illumination, but we are playing at 1080p right now, believe it or not, and the game does look a little bit better. Obviously the lighting quality is significantly better. Yeah, the game looks hella better, as Americans would say. Hella better, is that correct? I think it is. But the FPS though, we have lost quite a few frames in certain scenarios here. Like right now we're at what, 50 FPS, so we are at about 10 FPS less than what we were at on the beach. And look at the textures. Look at the textures. Don't pay attention to this because it bugs out. Even going back to the main menu and coming back in, it still messes up with the miscellaneous little textures all over the ground. Like it really. And by the way, the more you change settings and the more you do this, the more it breaks the ground clutter, basically. The more it breaks it. Look at the state of it. But it shouldn't affect performance in terms of how that looks, because I am going to the main menu and resetting these settings. I'm not actually like staying in the game and changing them. I am going back to the main menu, which is what the game says you have to do to apply new settings. So clearly they need to fix this. You know, they need to fix this miscellaneous texture or ground clutter bugging out whenever you change textures and settings and stuff in the main menu, because it should be completely fine. As the game says, go back to the main menu to reset settings. So I did. Should not have to restart your game to apply these, otherwise the game should specify it. But so they need to fix it, is what I'm trying to say. But here at the 1080p lowest settings, or low settings rather, low preset, it's actually quite demanding, as you can see. And funny enough, the low settings looks kind of like medium high in my opinion for a lot of games. What is that sound? Oh, it's a snail getting attacked. Okay. But yeah, like low settings looks way higher, like way higher than low, right? It looks like medium high. The only thing that really lets it down is the texture resolution itself. I think it would make more sense to have your textures set to high or medium at low settings and just not have as good shadows, right? But what do I know? Because the textures themselves look pretty horrific, right? They don't look very good. It is getting dark in the game, so it's getting hard to see things. And yeah, The actual like God rays or whatever, it's not really God rays, but the lighting looks pretty good. But the textures just don't look very good themselves. Oh, hello there, Diplo. How you doing? Anyway, but for actual VRAM usage here, even on low settings, we're actually using less VRAM in the game right now. We're using like 5.1 gigs of VRAM, allocating again around 7 gigs. And look at those shadows. Look at that grainy ass shadows over there. Look at the clouds as well. It just looks terrible. Like, the graininess of that is horrific. Like, the noise, essentially, over there is not good at all. It's not great. Everything's really dark, but I think it's just because it's becoming night now. But yeah, 1080p low settings, it's really pushing it, in all honesty. Only getting like 40 FPS in this area. It's still playable at 1080p like this, but I think it's going to be too much for 1440. But we'll have to see. So with that, we might as well go ahead and have a look at 1440p and see what it actually performs like here at low settings. Alright, now we're at 1440p. 100% resolution scale, of course, and we have the preset set to low still. Alright, now 1440p, the game looks way better. I think for a game like Ark to truly be appreciated, you need to play it at least 1440p. Like, in all honesty, the game looks way better at 1440p. But that could just be my biased opinion, because I am spoiled already by higher resolutions, right? I don't play games at 1080p anymore, usually, unless I'm really forced to play at 1080p because of, like, you know, FPS issues. But usually I will prefer to lower graphical options first before lowering resolution personally. And plus we have access to DLSS and FSR, which yes does downscale the resolution technically, but still looks better than completely lowering the resolution to 1080p in most games anyways. But here at 1440p, it actually looks pretty good here at low. In all honesty, other than the graininess, like, that is a real problem. That is disgusting, right? Like, what is that? That is awful. That does not look good at all. That's horrific. But if you can get over that, or you can probably find a fix for that, maybe a patch, maybe a mod, or I'm sure some of you would know which setting is causing that, and you can probably just lower or increase that setting up by itself. I don't know exactly which option is causing those grainy textures. I've not gone through individually each one and tested what setting is causing those grainy textures. Usually resolution scaling causes those texture issues or those shadow issues, but we are playing at 100% resolution, so I'm stumped at that. I really don't know. But yeah, the game looks amazing here. In all honesty, it doesn't look bad. Yes, there's still dark spots in the trees, and there's still dark spots everywhere, but it's not as bad as 1080p. It looks a lot better than 1080p. And it looks a lot better than completely minimum settings too. Wow, that dino looks pretty cool. Never seen it like that. I guess the Ark Survival Ascended got new, like, texture meshes or texture combos or color combos or something. But yeah, the game doesn't look that bad. It's not perfect, and it's actually a little bit too bright there, so maybe I'd want to turn bloom off or something. But it doesn't look bad at all. We are, again, using around 5 gigs of VRAM, so it looks like the VRAM is not going to be the issue here. It's just the fact that the GPU is not powerful enough itself to push higher frames. But yeah, 8 gigs still enough for these settings on low. I don't know about medium and high and all that, because that could well and truly be too much for just 8 gigs. I'm really not sure. But it doesn't matter anyways for the 3060 Ti, because we can't get higher frame rates anyways, or we can't use higher textures anyways, or higher settings necessarily, because we're already struggling for frames. Sorry. And we are getting around 50 FPS here. My averages so far have been about around 36, which is still within the playability range, but, you know, it is definitely pushing it there on if you would want to play like that. I am flying really fast, which is going to butcher the FPS a little bit, so just bear with me. I'm trying to find the starting beach again. I'm really struggling to see where it is. It's over here, I believe. Yeah, it's over here. Alright, we'll land here and we'll just take a quick look at the actual starting beach. And believe it or not, the starting beach on Ark Survival Evolved was very... was one of the least intensive areas on the map, right? But on this one, it's about the same as the island. This version of the game seems to be more consistent for FPS compared to Evolved. Ark Survival Evolved fluctuated a lot depending on where you were. This one does too, but it seems like the FPS is just kind of bad everywhere, so it's a bit more consistent. 40 FPS here is totally fine. High 30s, pushing it like I said, especially for somebody who plays at 1440p. You know, if you're a 1440p gamer or player, you're probably used to having quite high FPS, in all honesty, because you're not completely budget end, you are on the, you're like the middle end, right, at 1440p. Starting to become the more normal resolution now for sure, but there's still plenty of people playing at 1080p. You know, competitive players or people that just are on really tight budgets. But it can play here at 1440p. I'm going to say it can play. We're at 30s, right? Average FPS at about just under 40. I would say this is playable for Ark. It's not the perfect experience, but it is playable. RAM usage, again, it's been pretty consistent. We're at about 15.4 gigs, been pretty consistent around that 15 gig range, right? So 16 gigs of RAM seems like it's going to be okay, but if you're planning on playing Ark, I would definitely say get 32 gigs just to play it safe, because, you know, I don't know if mods are out for this game yet. They may be. I have not paid too much attention to Ark Survival Ascended, to be honest. But once mods and stuff come out, if they're not out already, then, you know, they're going to probably start to require a lot more RAM. And also, once you've got like big bases with dinos and yada yada, you're probably going to use a hell of a lot more RAM. So definitely get 32 gigs for Ark. But yeah, this CPU is obviously fine for Ark. Maybe you want to get a better GPU than this to play Ark at 1440p and 1080p, just so you can use the higher textures, right, or higher presets, higher settings essentially. But if you do have this GPU, or you're on a budget, or you're planning on getting a GPU or a GPU similar to this in terms of performance, you can play the game. So I'm going to leave it here. We're not going to be testing any higher settings. I could go and test medium. I could go ahead and test out these settings with like FSR, you know, messing around with scales and stuff, but we've got a good basis as to what you can play here. You can play minimum, and you can play at the low settings. You can probably play 1080p at medium as well, at decent-ish FPS. But that's going to do it for today. I've been Verda. Thanks for checking out the video. Like the video if you found any use out of this. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, take care of yourselves, and goodbye for now.